Have you ever wanted to create massive crowds of thousands of stampeding zombies in Unreal Engine? Well, in this video, I'll show you step-by-step how to use a Niagara particle emitter for crowd simulation and some free plugins and tools to create static meshes that are animated by their material instances. This will allow for thousands of animated meshes on screen at once, all running in real time. So grab a drink, grab a chainsaw, because where we're going, there's a lot of zombies. But first, let's watch a short cinematic that will showcase the effect we are creating. Okay, thanks for watching. Before we jump into the actual tutorial, I just want to kind of go over a couple of the limitations of this effect, how it's put together and what's going on, as well as make sure to shout out the tutorials that I followed and have sort of borrowed from in order to make this tutorial. Okay, so I have some of my settings turned down here so I can actually record and look at this stuff at the same time. But what is actually going on with this effect? Well, we have a Niagara emitter and a bunch of static mesh particles that are animated through Vertex Animation Textures. So their animations have been baked into their material instances, which are then animating their skeletal meshes. So let's go ahead and open up the actual Niagara emitter here. And let's take a look. So we have a fountain emitter, and you'll see up here, let's see, we can come down here and you'll see there's 7 individual static meshes here. So we can just go ahead and open one of these up, and we've got a zombie dude. And yeah, this is a static mesh, and as you can see up here, and he's being animated through his material instance. So we're going to learn how to actually make these in this tutorial, and you'll see we made 7 different ones. Here, I'll just open up another one, and we have 7 individual meshes that are all different, all with their own animation. And the idea is to create as much variety as we can in the Horde, in the particle effect that we're seeing here. And what you'll end up with is, just this single particle emitter that is creating this entire effect. So let's see if I can click on it here. Just go ahead and delete it. And just drag it back out here. And there you go. I have them kind of being emitted in this big, long row. And they're just kind of spawning in, plop into the ground, and then they hit the ground running, so to speak. And yeah, you can really see how this effect could be used for so many different things. I mean, imagine, a medieval army charging into battle, a stampede of animals, maybe, a stampede of wildebeests, maybe a lion falls into a canyon and a stampede of wildebeests runs him over. And then his son is exiled from the kingdom and has to come back and fight his own uncle. Anyway. Okay, so let's talk about some of the limitations here. There's no interparticle collisions. So if you look closely, you'll see the zombies are just running through each other. I did try to add interparticle collisions using neighbor grids, and it just got a little too complicated for this. I would love to see someone else build on top of this and add that in. But that is one of the limitations. I also figured it doesn't really matter that much for, the actual shots I was trying to create. So another limitation is you can't really control the direction that they're running in by just rotating the particle emitter. Let's see. We just select that. So if I were to try and like rotate this emitter, for example, it'll rotate, the shape that they're spawned in, but like once they hit the ground, they're going to keep running in that direction. And so in order to actually change the direction that they're running in, you need to go into the emitter, and I've set up a way to kind of easily change their direction this way. So you can kind of change. Right now they're running on the X axis. So if you wanted them to run in the opposite direction, you would just change this to, a positive range of 40 to 60. And so now you'll see as they hit the ground, they start running in the opposite direction. And, if you look at how this is set up here just really quick, and of course we'll get into all of this in the tutorial, but you see on the X vector, it has, a range of velocity. And then on the Y vector, it's using a sine shape to sort of add a little bit of like lateral wiggle to their path, so they're not just running in like a straight line. And this is kind of hard to switch around every time you want to, so if you wanted them to run on the y-axis as opposed to just back and forth like this, it's kind of annoying to like change these. So I've added an additional linear force in here that's set up the exact same way, just opposite. So here we have the linear force applied on the y axis, and the sine shape is applied to the x axis, and you can see now they're running this way. And likewise, you can, if you wanted them to run that way, you just set this to negative. Okay. But other than that, this is a super cool effect, and the skills that you'll learn in this tutorial can really be applied to a lot of different things. So, just knowing how to bake these static meshes and animate them using Vertex Animation Textures, and to do that all in Unreal Engine without leaving and going to some other software like Blender or Maya, that's all super valuable and can absolutely come in, it will be useful in the future if you ever need to create large crowd simulations, or you want large amounts of instanced static meshes that are animated. And likewise, just learning a little bit about the particle emitters and how they work, and how to kind of you can turn, a basic particle emitter into something that can be, like a crowd simulation. This is all really cool, and like I said, can be useful into the future. And so before we get started, I just want to shout out the two of the main tutorials that I sort of combined to create this effect. I really watched a lot of tutorials to try and figure out all of this stuff, but there's two main ones that I'm drawing from very much so. And the first one is this tutorial by Praxis on YouTube, Unreal Engine 5 AnimToTexture plugin, how to use it to make Vertex Animation Textures for crowds. And he has developed this tool that you see here docked in his editor, and that is what allows you to actually bake the animations into these static mesh materials. And we're going to go over how to do that and how to install his tool here. And the other is from Code Like Me on YouTube, Unreal Engine 5 Swarm of Rats with Niagara. And as you can see, this is where I got a lot of the particle logic from. It's basically this effect that he created with some modifications, and then I've combined, Praxis's Vertex to Animation Texture tutorial. So I just wanted to make sure I shout out those two creators, and I've put links to both of their tutorials in the description, as well as a link to Praxis's tool on GitHub that we will be using, and I will show how to install that in the tutorial coming up. But yeah, make sure to give them, a like and subscribe and all that. With all that said, let's dive in and start making zombies. Okay, so here we are in the Epic Games launcher, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to launch Unreal Engine 5.5, in my case 5.5.1. All right, and the first thing you're going to do is come over to the Games tab over here, and we're just going to create a blank, and we'll call this Zombie Tut. All right, so we have our project open, and the first thing we're going to do is just go and create a new level. Just do a basic, create that. Okay. And while we're here, why don't we just go ahead and save, and we'll call this zombie setup. Great. And while we're at it, why don't we just go up to edit our project settings, and we'll make sure this is our boot up map, and in case we crash and anytime we start up the game. So I'll just go to our startup map, and we'll just select zombie setup. Okay, that's good. And the next thing we want to do is actually enable the plugin, which is the AnimToTexture plugin. So just go up to here, edit, plugins, and you can just search AnimToTexture. Great. We'll just go ahead and enable that, and you can just go ahead and restart now. Okay, so now that our project is booted back up, we need to go over to Github to download the tool that was made by Praxis, and I'll put a link in the description, as well as you can click it up in the corner of the screen. Okay, and now we're over at GitHub, and you can see the tools that are over here, and this is the latest version of the tool, and you can see it was 5.4.4. However, it seemed to work just fine for 5.5.1, so just go ahead and click that. And then just go right over here and download the raw file. Okay, now that you have that downloaded, go to your project folder and open up your content folder. And then you're going to drag the U asset that you just downloaded, drag it into your content folder, and it'll show up right inside your project. All right, so just go right over to the tool here, and it's an editor utility widget, by the way. So just right click and go up to run editor utility widget, and that'll just pop up right here. And here you can see this contains all the functionality that we're going to need to make our instanced static meshes and our Vertex Animation Textures. And it's all very easy, and it's super convenient that Praxis has built this and given this away for free. And so we're going to go through all of this in a minute. So let's just go ahead and dock that over here. So what we need to do first before we go any further on this process is actually add the assets that we're going to use. So some zombies and some zombie animations. And I'm going to be using ones from Fab, from the marketplace, but you could totally use them from Mixamo or some other website. And here's one of the packs that I used that I have pulled up already, just called Zombie Pack by Undead Shop. I'll put a link in the description. I think it was like $50 for these 3 characters. Anyway, go ahead and add that to your project. Let's see. It doesn't have 5.5, but that's okay. Just add it anyway. And then I used this 73 zombie animations pack from Gem Games for the animations, and they worked pretty well. I've had them for a while. I can't remember how much I paid for them. Anyway, go to add project, and then here we'll just take a quick look at the animations here. These ones are great because it came with 9 different running animations, so that gave me a lot of variety. Which is really important to really selling the effect. You want a lot of variety in the animations in the crowd that you're showing. So, some of these are pretty goofy. That one's pretty cool. And then why don't we really quickly look at the zombies we pulled in too. So let's go over to our zombie pack here, and we'll go to the mutant guy and go to mesh. And here is the skeletal mesh. And there you go. He looks pretty cool. So what we want to do is actually retarget some of the animations that we pulled in to this skeleton. And That will all make sense when we come over here, and you'll see that we'll be putting in animations into the array. We'll be putting the skeletal mesh, this one in there, but we need to have the animations pointing to this guy's skeleton when we add this guy to this skeletal mesh slot. So let's go over and retarget some of those animations right now. Go back to our zombie runs, and we'll do this one, or the guy kind of plodding forward. So just right click on the animation, go up here, retarget animations, and it looks like we have to reselect it from over here. Run 7, double click, and that'll start playing there. And then the target skeletal mesh, we will find that right here, and it's actually right here already. We're going to select SK Army Mutant, and you should see them running together. And we're going to go to export animations, and let's actually let's make a new folder here really quickly for the retargeted animations. So we'll select that and just export it to there. Great. Okay, and now we have the animation all set up and retargeted. And before we go any further, I actually want to just add another folder to our content folder, and we'll just call this zombie meshes. And this is just going to help us stay a tiny bit more organized here. And let's just move our zombie skeletal mesh. Let's just move that into here for now. And great. So now he's sitting in there, and this will just help keep us a little bit more organized as we start to get our static meshes built out. So before we start to convert the skeletal mesh into the static mesh and bake the animations into that material, we need to modify his material a little bit and create a material instance before we run through all of these buttons. And the easiest way to do that is to look at the examples from the AnimToTexture plugin that we installed and just copy some of that blueprint into this guy's material. So make sure you can see your plugin content. So come over here to settings and just make sure you see show plugin content there. Then you can come over here and come down to your engine folder, and you'll see there's plugins, and we're looking for, there we go, AnimToTexture content. That's the plugin we installed. And you can just open up characters, and we'll look at the mannequin. And in here, you'll see, you can just click on this blueprint here. We'll look at the viewport, and you can see these are instant static meshes that are being animated by their materials. So this is exactly what we are going to do next. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this guy's material, copy some of that to our other guys, to our zombies material. Okay. So if you come over here and click on the instance static mesh component, you'll see here's the static mesh, and here are its two material slots. Now, our zombie only has one material slot, I believe. So let's see, we'll just get him open. Yep, so we only have one material slot, and this guy has two. If your zombie or whatever character you're using has two material slots, that's totally fine. You basically just do the process that we're about to do twice. You do it for both of this guy's material slots. But in this case, we just have to do it for one. So let's go back to the example, and we'll go ahead and we'll open this up, and there you go. It looks kind of weird. This is the material instance, and we're going to go to the parent material, and we'll just go ahead and make this bigger. And this is the section that we're going to be copying into our material of this guy. So let's get his material open. All right. And okay, let's go back to here. I'm going to close this material instance just so we just have the two main materials open up here. This is the mannequin's parent material. So this is the section we're going to copy here. So we're just going to copy this, and we'll paste this into here in the zombies material. Great. Now before we go any further, let's go ahead and add a make material attributes node. Great. And what we're going to do is we're just going to hold down Control and drag these over to their corresponding inputs. Normal to normal. Ambient occlusion to ambient occlusion. Great. And now this has been disconnected. So with this, your result node, you want to have that selected. Come over here and click Use Material Attributes. Great. And now we have our result node. We can move this over here. And let's just, before I explain all this, let's just connect them. So we're done. This comes out to here. And before we connect this node to our result node here, Trash Praxis actually adds in a little switch to toggle whether or not you use your material attributes or you use these material layers, this logic here that we just pasted in. So we're going to do the same thing. And if this is confusing, don't worry, this will all make sense in a minute when we get to setting up our material instance. But for now, let's just add a static switch node and a static bool parameter. And we'll call this use layers. And to hook this up, we'll just scoot this over here. And this is the default value. And so if we do use the layers, then the value is true. And if not, we'll just come right out of these material attributes, go into false, and output from the switch will go into here. Great. Let's go ahead and save. All right, and now your parent material for the zombie is all set up. So let me just make this a tiny bit more organized here. Cool. So there's the parent material. And if you have another material slot in your skeletal mesh, we don't. But if you do, at this point, you could just copy and paste this stuff that we just set up. You just copy and paste this into the other material and set it up exactly like we did here. Great, so let's just make sure we save all that. And we actually want to go to where this material is saved because we need to create a material instance. So let's come back here and let's just kind of pull this down a little bit. And you can click this little folder here with the magnifying glass, and that will just pull up the material that we just set up. And we actually want to make a material instance of this. So just right click and come up to create material instance, and we'll just leave that there. I think maybe in order to keep this organized, let's move these two materials that we were just working with. Let's move them into our sort of zombie meshes folder here. Okay, and this is just keeping all of our sort of modified assets a little bit more organized. So if we want to just click on this material instance that we just made, we can come up here and expand this. And this is the little switch that we set up to use the layers. And you can see there are some layers over here. And don't worry that there isn't really anything shown here now. This will all populate once we get into this process here. Okay. And actually, we can start that process right now. We have everything set up and ready to go. So let's just go ahead and minimize this. And the first thing we can do is we can just take our skeletal mesh and add it to the slot here. And now we can go to create static mesh from selected. So just click that and boom, we now have the static mesh created. And let's go ahead and add our animation to this array up here. So you click the little plus to add a slot. Let's go to our animations folder with the animation that we retargeted. Let's go ahead and plop that in there. And in Trash Praxis tutorial, he adds a bunch of animations, a bunch of idle animations to this static mesh. And you could do that here too. But the way he ends up setting up his crowd is different from the way we're doing ours. We're using a Niagara particle effect to create our zombie horde, and he uses a blueprint to sort of distribute the static meshes in a crowd and vary their animations and stagger them and so on. And I highly recommend if you want to do that, check out his tutorial for that, and I'll put the link up here again or down in the description. But as I mentioned in the intro, it's hard to get the material blueprint to communicate with the Niagara particle effect and send all the different animations to it. So, as I mentioned before, I ended up just setting up a bunch of different, static meshes with different animations. It's not the most elegant or efficient method, but it works for the effect that we're trying to make. So anyway, we're going to stick with just one animation, one running animation for this one static mesh. And actually, before we continue on with these buttons and filling out the rest of these slots, let's actually go back to our static mesh here that we created. So that showed up right next to our skeletal mesh. Let's open that, and let's make sure we change this guy's material slot to the material instance. So we're changing the static meshes material from the original material into the material instance that we made. Great. So go ahead and save that, and we'll minimize. All right, and so now we can come up here to create textures. We'll click that, and that's just going to create some empty textures to populate these slots, and they pop up right here. And we'll just keep moving along. You can see there's the empty dataset slot. We will click Create Dataset, and that creates that. And then we'll click Set Data Parameters, and that is actually going to fill out our data asset that we just made. So let's open that up and take a look here, and this will help communicate what we're actually baking into these material layers. So up here we have our skeletal mesh, static mesh, and really important, you want to come down here, you want to click this, enforce power of 2. Check that. We're at 16 bits for precision, and our mode is bone. That looks good. These have the empty textures that we just made. And then coming down to the animation, I'm not 100% how important this next step is that I'm going to do, but I like to set it up anyway, and this is just going to tell it exactly what, exactly the properties of this animation. So let's find this. So this is the animation we're using, and I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at these details that pop up, and it says source frame rate is 91 frames. So, that's our sample. I'm going to change it from 60 to 91, and we'll do the use custom range down here. So like come down here and expand your index here. We'll use the custom range, start frame 0, and this number of frames, I can't really point to it. You have to kind of just look where it is. It says number of frames is 19. So start frame 0, end frame 19 minus 1 is, we'll do 18. So that's all of the frames there. Okay, so that's just going to make sure our animation is looping properly and isn't like snapping back to T-pose or cutting off frames. This way it knows exactly the number of frames that are and the sample rate that the animation is. Okay, let's go ahead and save that. I think that's all we need for now. Go ahead and minimize. And we should be ready to bake the data. So let's just go ahead and click that. Great. And here we go. We can see our textures have updated. That looks really good. Here we can go back to where our static mesh is. Let's go ahead and open that up. And he's not going to be doing anything yet. So that's fine. Here we have our material instance. Let's open that. And in here, go to the details. And at this point, we'll turn on the use layers switch that we used. And that's looking pretty wacky. And then go over here to your layer parameters. And now you'll see that these are all filled out. And let's see, open your static switch parameter values. Make sure autoplay is on. Use for influences is checked. We can uncheck use UV 0. It's now using these new UVs. That's fine. And okay, let's see. And then, yeah, there we go. We've got our running zombie. And he looks a little wacky. So in this case, I think he's running a little too fast. And that's really easy to change. You do that in the material instance that we set up. So go back to the material instance, go to the layer parameters tab, and we'll come down here to scalar parameter values. And here you can see the values that we input when we baked it. And the sample rate here, let's just try turning this down from 91 to, let's see, let's do like 60. I'll hit enter. And now you can see he's running a little bit slower. Still looks a little, let's go down to like 30. What does that look like? Okay, now he's running a little too slow. Let's try 50. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Looks pretty good. Okay. Let's just go ahead and save all of that. And we can minimize. Why don't we just drag this guy out here? That's pretty cool. We have a static mesh that is being animated by its material layers. And this, you can now create thousands, tens of thousands of these instanced static meshes, and it will be way more performant than if you were using, say, a skeletal mesh and an animation for that skeletal mesh. So awesome. We have our first zombie, and we're ready to move on to the Niagara particle effect. If you wanted to add more zombies to your particle effect, which I highly recommend you do, basically just do the whole thing that we just did. Do that for as many individual zombies as you want. And, you'll be adding some different meshes and different animations to those zombies to give them as much variety as possible. And, actually, I might just really quickly set up a second particle, a second zombie particle, doing exactly what we just did, just so we have two to work on when we set up our Niagara effect. Okay. So I'm just going to do that, and I might just speed it up, but keep in mind it's doing the exact same thing as we just did. And before we go any further, let's just keep this all organized and tidy. So we'll just go ahead and make a new folder, and we'll call this guy Zombie 01, and we'll just go ahead and select all of these, and we'll just move all of those assets into there. And so that's just keeping our zombie meshes folder a little bit more organized. Okay, so we can just go to the zombie cop from the same zombie pack, and we'll find a skeletal mesh and move it into our zombie mesh folder. Let's open that up and let's find his material and move that into the zombie folder as well. Just consolidating that. And now let's go back to the parent material that we set up, and we'll copy that stuff over into our new zombies material. And this is just like what we did before. We're just relinking these materials, use material attributes, move that node over, reconnect it, and that's all set up. And then remember to make it a material instance. And now we can go over to our tool here and we can clear all of these fields, and we can move our, I realized that for the animations, I can actually use the animations that came with the zombie. So this running one looks good. So I'll just add that to the array. We don't have to retarget anything. And we'll grab the skeletal mesh, move it in there, and we're ready to create the static mesh. Open that up, put the material instance in its material slot, create textures, create data set, set data parameters, open up the data set, check power of 2, and remember to fill out your animation sequence fields here with the proper sample rate, and then you can bake the data, and then come over here. Remember to just turn on, use material layers, and there you go. You've got your second static mesh up and running, literally. And now I'm going to speed up again, and I'm going to do the exact same process for the other 2 zombies that came in the pack. Just so we have 4 different zombies with 4 different running animations for as much variety. And I realized that the pack of the 4 zombies didn't come with enough variety of running animations, so I went back to the motion capture pack that I had and retargeted 2 different running animations from that motion capture animation, just to give it the most variety with what I have. And so, yep, just did that for the 2 remaining zombies in the pack, and I ended up with 4 zombies in total, all with their own individual running animations. And yeah, I would recommend setting up more if you can, if you have access to more zombies and more zombie animations. The more variety, the better. Okay, so now we have our happy little family of zombies all up and running, and they're looking great. And here, let's just quickly go down here. We're in our content folder, and you can see we have all 4 of our zombies. Here's the first one in its folder, and you can see they each have their own little folder here to just keep it nice and organized. So we're actually done with this tool now, and we're ready to move on to the Niagara particle emitter. So big thank you to Trash Praxis for creating this tool and giving it away for free, and showing how to do this whole process inside Unreal Engine. So make sure to give his video a like and subscribe and all that. So let's go ahead and just close that. Oh, and one really quick thing before moving on. I actually had to revert to a save here. I had all of those static meshes open, and I went to close, and a message popped up saying, do you want to apply the level of detail to the static meshes? And just click no. And yeah, click no, and it will, because if you apply the level of details, it's going to break the UVs, and they'll look like a ball of spiky things, and that's not what you want. All right, so before we continue, just make sure you have your Niagara plugin enabled. It should be on by default, but just make sure that's on. All right, and now we'll go ahead and we are going to create a new Niagara system. And we are going to use a fountain, and we'll call this NS for Niagara System Zombie Horde. Great. So let's go ahead and open that up. And okay, so the first thing we want to do is we can just go ahead and we can delete this sprite renderer, and because we want to have meshes. So we're going to add a mesh renderer down there. And over here, you can see under the meshes, there's an array. And there's just this thing in here for now, but we're going to actually add some to that. And great, now we have ones for all 4 of our zombies here. So let's go to our zombie meshes, and let's pull our static meshes into here right now, and it's already starting to look weird. Man, particles are cool. Great. Just grabbing all our zoms, our Z buddies. Okay, great. Now we have all 4 of our meshes in this array, and you'll remember that in the one that I used for the cinematics I showed at the beginning, I had 7 different static meshes with 7 different animations, but for this we're just doing 4 just for speed. So go ahead and save that. Great, so let's actually just pull our emitter out into our field here, and let me just minimize this really quickly. Let's actually make this bigger. Much bigger. Okay, and here we go. We'll just pull that out, and this is what it's looking like so far. Let's move it off the ground a tiny bit. So let's come back to our particle emitter, and let's go up to this where it says add velocity under particle spawn, and we're going to just change this to linear, and let's change the velocity to random range vector. This is going to kind of just change how they spread out at the very beginning as they're emitted. Give it that. We don't need a vertical. We don't need them to be like thrown up in the air, so we don't need to give them any vertical velocity. Okay, that looks good. And then under particle update, we're going to add a collision so that they actually hit the ground. All right. Looking better already. Oh, and I realized, so it's only spawning one guy right now, the first one in the array, the mesh array. It's only spawning this one right now. So if you come over to initialize particle under particle spawn, we can come down to mesh attributes, and where it says mesh render array visible, let's set to random. And let's see, mesh render, select mesh render, and there we go. We're getting more zombies now. All 4 of them should be spawning randomly now. Okay, so now I think I want to actually increase their lifetime so they're not just disappearing so quickly. So let's go over to initialize particle, and you'll see lifetime mode random, and it gives a minimum and maximum. That's good. I already know the lifetimes that I want in there because I've set this up before. So you can, of course, play around with all of these variables to get the desired effect, but we're going to go with that for now. Here you can also change the scale as well. So we can change the scale to be a random uniform mode, and here you can, so this will just make them a little bit bigger or smaller. I like to do 1 as the biggest, and then I think I set it to 0.8, so there's maybe like a 20% variation between their actual size. And go ahead and save that. It's already compiled though. All right, so now we want to give them some linear force to actually move them across the ground and through the world. So we're going to do that under particle update. So let's go over here, and we're going to add a linear force, and let's change the coordinate space to world, and let's go ahead and make it like 100 All right, and you see they're starting to scoot out that way, and they're slowing down. So let's go ahead and turn off drag. Okay, that's helping a lot. And so yeah, you can see how they're starting and they're getting their initial amount of force, and they're moving out and slowing down. And right now, that's because we have, we don't have a strong enough force to overcome the gravity. You could lower the gravity if you want. Just like this would, kind of lower it to like half, and you'll see they'll start to move more and further. But I want the gravity to be normal. Like, I really want the effect of them falling properly as they like go over the ledge. So I'm going to keep it there, and we can go over, and you'll kind of just have to play with the amount of force, and that'll kind of change depending on what environment you're using, how fast you want them to move, and so on. Like, are you trying to push them up a hill? That will all come into play, and you'll kind of just be playing with this force here. But we're going to also want to change this to a random range vector here. And now we can, let's see, we can give it, let's say we do 100 to 200 for now. How's that looking? Okay. I think we know 100's too slow. You'll see they're starting to fall off the ledge here. That's kind of cool. Yeah, so 100 is kind of too slow, and you'll see the ones that are spawning with too slow of a linear force are kind of getting clumped up here. And so let's make that higher, something like 250. Oops, not 250. Like, let's do like 175. And let's see if that helps. And we're going to dial this in as we go. So don't worry about getting it perfect right this second. And because, as I said, you'll be changing it depending on the environment that you like drop this particle effect into. But for now, that's looking pretty cool. But before we move on from the linear force, I kind of just want to actually change some stuff here to add some more randomization into this. So what we're going to do is actually change this from a random range vector. We're going to do make vector. Great. And so now we get all three of these vectors, and we'll do random range float. And now we can change this back to what we had. What was it? 150, 200, something like that. And what we can do now that we've made this whole thing a vector, we can now change the Y force. We can give it a little bit of wiggle and randomize that wiggle by turning the Y vector into a sine. So we're just clicking on these little side arrows and make sine, and then the scale we can change to, we can make that a random float as well, a random range float. So we can add, let's do, and we'll actually randomize the period as well. Change that to a random range float. And I'm just going to, I already have this figured out just kind of through trial and error. But so I'm copying this from my original one. But just, so I did a scale of -200 and a maximum of 200 and a period of -10 and a maximum of 10. And, really feel free to play around with these to kind of, change up how they're actually, wiggling back and forth. Okay, so yeah, they're running sideways, and it's not there yet, but we are getting there. So we can actually make these spread out a little bit more to get a better idea of what the horde is actually looking like. Like right now, they're being emitted from like a sort of spherical volume, and that's under particle spawn. You'll see shape location, and it's set to sphere. So if we go over that, we can change that to a box/plane, and we can then change the box size to, I don't know, 1,000 by 1,000. All right, and that's starting to spread them out. That's spreading out the area. We don't need a vertical one. We're just spreading them out over a horizontal area. And you can see that's starting to spread them out a little bit. And of course, you can change this to whatever you want as well, whatever suits your purposes. But let's just see. Let's keep that at 1,000. Let's do 3,000. Okay, so now we're getting a little bit more of like a crowd running in that direction. Starting to look pretty cool. And really quickly before we go any further, I just want to show how you can change the spawn rate. If you go over to the emitter update over here, you'll see there's emitter state and spawn rate, and those will both show up over here. And okay, so you can see we have like our loop behavior and the loop duration, and then the spawn rate. So if you wanted, more zombies to be appearing right here, you could say, I don't know, change this to 300, and now we're going to get a lot more zombies, a lot faster. And as you can see here, it's in a loop, but you could change it to just spawn once, for example. So you just switch it to once, and boom, it's just going to poop out a bunch of like 300 zombies right there. And that could be useful for something else if you wanted. But I like for example, if you wanted to distribute them in a little bit more controlled way over an environment, you could say, change your shape location to something like, really big. And then it's going to spawn 300 zombies over, just once over that whole size. So that might be useful for you doing, depending on what you're doing. But for now, I'm going to change that back, and I'm going to go back to my spawn rate. Again, we just have the emitter update here. We'll go back to our spawn rate. We'll just change it back to 90. I'll just leave it there for now, and we're going to keep it looping, an infinite loop. So they're going to keep spawning. The emitter is going to keep just pumping them out and creating this sort of constant flow of zombies that you can use to kind of send the horde through your environment. And then another thing before we go any further, as I mentioned, before the tutorial started, there's not a great way to like rotate the emitter and change the direction of the zombies. So the best way that I've found to give me some control over that is, you go to your linear force, and see we're sending them in this direction. And so say you wanted to like, send them in the other direction, you just change these to a negative force, and they'll start running in the other direction, the opposite direction. And then, if you wanted them to move along the y-axis and have the x-axis be, their sort of sine wave, you would switch these around. Now, the easiest way to do that is to just copy this and give yourself 2 linear forces, and make sure you disable one, because now you can have 2 linear forces, and you can have one set up to be like your movement along the x-axis, and then one to be set up for movement along the y-axis. So now that we have this duplicated, we can actually switch these around. So we can just go up to the X here and make that a sine. And we'll go ahead and let's reset all of these to a random range float. Same thing with the scale. Random range float. Minimum period -10, 10, minimum minus 200, 200, and then the Y, a random range float, and we'll give that 50, 200, and we'll just leave that for now. And yeah, so now you can kind of control where they're running at least a little bit in sort of the cardinal direction, or the main X and Y directions. So let's say we wanted them to go back in the other way. We just disable that force and enable our other one, and we're back to moving in that direction. Okay. Obviously, they're running sideways, which is not what we want. So what we can do is go down to the mesh renderer here in our particle emitter, and you can go down to facing mode and change it to velocity. So now they're going to orient themselves in the direction of that they are moving in, or so we would like. They're still running sideways, but you can see, as they fall, they're falling down, and they're doing these crazy bounces. We'll fix that in a minute. I'm gonna actually just move this down because we're gonna fix all of this in a second. So we need to fix them facing in the wrong direction. Even though we have them set to face the direction of their velocity, they're facing in the wrong direction. So we can do that by adding an update mesh orientation under the particle update. And we can go and change it to orient to vector. Stabilization mode, just facing. And we can change the facing direction here to -90. Okay, great. Now they're finally running in they're facing the proper direction as they run, and that's looking good. All right, so they're facing the right direction and everything, but we're still having some problems with speed. Also, I'm going to turn off this god-awful preview window. It's just flickering. Okay, so we still have some people getting stuck, and we have some people moving way too fast, and we have this crazy bouncing going on. So let's fix that really quick. Let's go to the collision here. And the way you control the bounce is this variable called restitution under bounce, and its default is 0.6. Let's just change it to 0.1. And all right, that helps a lot with the bouncing. However, they're really clumping up here at the beginning. Some guys are running out ahead, but we want to fix this clumping, and that's because we have some friction when they collide, and we can actually turn this down, by a good amount. So it's 0.25. I changed it to 0.05, and there we go. We're getting the guys actually starting to run, and all right, that's looking really good. They are going very fast. Let's go to our linear force. Let's turn this down by a lot here. Let's go to -80 and say -120. Those are the values that I have in my emitter that I used in the cinematics, and that's looking pretty good. Also, really quickly, let's get these shadows turned on the particle, on the meshes. So just select your particle effect, and over here in the details panel, you can click cast shadow, and that's going to start looking a lot better really quickly. Very nice. And then, of course, you know, they're just kind of blinking into existence, and then you can't see here, but because they're all falling off the cliff here, they're all just disappearing. Let's see, we're not gonna fly all the way down there and check them out, but you can make it so that they, you know, they're not just blinking in and out of existence. You can add a, you can scale their meshes in and out to kind of make it, you know, if you're looking at it up close, it's going to look weird. But, you know, if you're looking at it from afar, which is how I recommend, you know, actually using this, if any zombies get like stuck on something, you know, for a while, rather than just like disappearing, they will sort of like scale down to 0 and just kind of ease out. And it just kind of helps with, you know, not drawing your eye to that effect. So let's just do that really quickly here. In the particle update, we'll add a scale mesh size. So then we can multiply this vector by a float. Great. And we can turn this float into a curve. And so then in the curve over here, we can just take this one and drag it down to 0, 0, and we'll add in a key there, and we'll set its value to 1. And likewise, we'll add a key there, set its value to 1. Let's move these a little bit closer to the ends. 0.95, good. And this one, do 0.05. We might speed that up a little. Let's do 0.02. Now they're kind of like inflating as they spawn into the world. And so that's cool. Just go ahead and save that. And that's the effect right there. That's the whole zombie horde. And so you can, of course, you know, play around with all of these different parameters, add, you know, more zombies, more animations. If anyone knows how to, you know, set up the actual offset of the animations, you know, so that they start at a random point maybe, and then if you know how to, you know, bake multiple animations into the Vertex Animation Texture and then have those randomly selected by the Niagara emitter, you know, please let us know in the comments, or, you know, keep building off this tutorial as I've built off, you know, the other people's tutorials, and we'll keep kind of, you know, all helping each other. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and, you know, I would love to show, you know, the camera effects and, you know, all the editing and cinematography tricks that went into the opening cinematic, but this is getting way too long of a tutorial, and I think those are better suited for their own standalone tutorial. And I might even return to using this particle effect and just focusing on the actual cinematography of it. But there you go. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.